last panel discussion and something from what Vinay said took me back to like 3 years when I was in a company called as Echo General Insurance. And when I started my journey of calling up campus place commerce for we want to recruit from IIMs and everything, that's the first thing that even I heard. That humko insurance nahi chahiye. But I was quick to learn. I then started with the philosophy of saying, I'm calling from the hiring team off, and then have a pause. And now when they realize it's a hiring manager or someone from the HR team calling, and then say the Echo General Insurance, they would hear me loud. So that's my hack of surviving the TruScholar thing. So when I was here, I was wondering, like, what is employer branding and what are we going to talk about in the next 30-35 minutes? I think one quote from Simon Sinek really stayed with me in terms of employer branding. If we have to put it in a quote, will be like, customers will never love a company. He said this until the employees start loving that company. So I think employer branding in particular, for me, says to be the love that the employee has towards the organization. And not only the employee who's working in the organization, a prospective employee also. The amount of love and respect that that employee would have for an organization. So to begin with, I would start with Pranav and on a question which I've been pondering about, the fact that this pandemic, a lot of worse things happened, but I think one of the good things that happened with pandemic was that a lot of things have evolved. There are new jobs that are being evolved. There are new industries that are coming into picture. So whatever worked in pre-pandemic is no longer relevant. We have terminologies like gig economy, moonlighting that have now popped up. Moonlighting is something that gets discussed on Twitter hashtags to boardroom discussions. With all of that happening, Pranav, I wanted to understand, in terms of employer branding, whatever practices that were there earlier, pre-pandemic, are they still relevant? Do you see them evolving in this coming decade? If yes, then how should we, as someone who have employer branding as a charter, be ready for these changes, and how should we evolve?
Thank you. So I think everyone is from HR here, right? Or non-HRs, raise your hand. So I think rather all of us are from HR. So we know what you did last summer is from where we start. And pre-pandemic was a age when what I feel and what all of us will see, things were more jo dikhta hai wo bikta hai, right? So big offices, when I was working with Renault, so the ambience, the colors, right? And the workplace was most important. And then the pandemic happened, and we all had something beautiful as business continuity plans, and we were very happy about it. But the pandemic happened, and we never knew how to deploy it, right? All of us. And we all learned in the ecosystem from each other. Now then, and we had some merciless way of working from different companies. We saw various such examples, not to name any one of them. But more than the dikhta hai, bikta hai, we started thinking about, someone mentioned in the previous panel, something called care. And then entire pandemic a word was sitting in all the discussions, which was called empathy. And then there was one more word which came, which was called compassion. And above all, there was a word called purpose. Now those companies which connected with the employee's purpose, or the other way, the employees whose purpose is connected with the purpose of the company, they had no problem. And now the same offices, jo dikhta hai wo bikta hai, they have opened, and they have all the issues of calling employees back to office. And just to mention, because that was a phase, my heart goes there with the organization where I worked. And we all had a different mechanisms then, because finance, rather the CFO was chasing us to reduce the cost, and we all had our fancy ways to do it. And then when I went to the people and I told that, see, I have one pressure from the finance department that I have to reduce the cost of the company. Now, it is two ways that I reduce the headcount. And the headcount, of course, with the operating cost, what we see is almost the 70% of the cost comes from the payroll cost. Or the hikes which I am giving to you, can I delay it for a quarter or let's say 2 quarters? And we all felt it, that employees took the brunt and we stood as a strong company. Now this, when I say the purpose is connected, and which is quite relevant now with few last month what you say happened, and I will not again mention the companies where you had the sacking happening, and lot of people came back searching for those companies. So someone was discussing before, and also we have to be very careful that what age bracket of the people what we're hiring in India is quite a young company that way. So what is quite attractive for a millennial may differs from a Gen X and further. So the first thing is how much you pay, and that is the first strategy. The more salary you pay, and you can have your employee acquisition strategy further, and how we'll build the brand. But then comes the purpose, and someone very subtly mentioned the care factor, right? The empathy factor and the compassion factor. So you will have the offices which don't have these three words will still be vacant, and the companies in a very subtle way which is able to pronounce and underline these things to the future or the prospective employees, I think will be the companies which will be there and which will be doing a good branding work in the times to come. That's all from my side. Thank you.
Thanks, Pranav. Pallavi, Gayathri, any views on how do you see employer branding practices changing in the coming decade?
So that's a very interesting question. I see that employer branding remains dynamic, because if you see the constitution of work, right? You have workforce, you have workplace, you have work environment. Everything is changing these days. So you're talking about digital workplace, you're talking about physical workplace. So how many of you go to office to work these days? All of you. So how many of you go to office to work only? So none, right? Or very few of you. So basically what we are saying is, your workplace is not only to complete your work. Work can be completed any place, anywhere, anytime these days, right? Because of the technology and whatever facility we are having. We are going to workplace to network, to collaborate, to create the sense of belonging. So I think the employer branding, if it reaches your newest team member and exists in their ecosystem, whether it is an Indeed or whether it is Insta, and then your employer branding is successful. So what we did was, when pandemic hit, so I'm in one of the company like SAP where flexible work hours is given, right? There is workplace flexibility. Pandemic hit and everybody started working from home. So then we started thinking about what is our employee value proposition. We can no longer say that we are a flexible company, because many people started moving back to Jharkhand and other places, and they started thinking about moving to companies which are close to their workplace. Then we did a lot of things, but one example I'll give. We kind of reimagined the definition of family. So we came up with a family care leave, because we thought that many people were under stress, and a lot of episodes were happening. And the family included even pet, for that matter, because we know that there are a lot of pet lovers amongst guidance about it, to take, just to check that how do you come out of that. So these are some of the benefits which I wouldn't have thought about it maybe previously, but then thanks to pandemic, it is just a eye-opener for us on how you think constantly about your employee value proposition. And in that sense, Kushal, I would say that your employer branding and employee value proposition goes hand in hand. And when you get those authentic stories like some of the panelists spoke about before, when you're going to publish those employee stories, and that adds to the authenticity of your employer branding.
I think you have added most of it. So I feel, honestly, there's nothing much that has changed, right? So I started my career in employer branding almost about 12 years back. It was pretty niche back then. I started with a very well-established organization called Publicis Sapient. And at that time, I think we were one of the few organizations who were really investing in this space. We had a very large team who were actually, who was working on creating the employer brand of the organization. But even then, the concept of employer branding had not evolved. It was more about recruitment marketing. The focus was more on, okay, how do we showcase that, yes, we are a great place to work, or yes, we have these kind of opportunities, and people should come and apply, or how do we land a great candidate experience, or how do we really get a lot of referrals, so on and so forth. I think over the years, I have personally seen employer branding evolving. Now it's no more about just showcasing who we are. It's also about making sure that whatever we are showcasing, we are actually delivering, and it's actually the truth, right? So yeah, I think the crux of employer branding is employees. It has to be employee-centric. It will differ from organization to organization. You just need to understand what does your employee wants. You know, what are their motivational factors? What is your value proposition? What is unique about working in your organization? And just deliver on that. I think post-pandemic, a lot of misconceptions have changed, right? Earlier it was like, okay, we can't give a lot of flexibility to people because there was a perception that people don't work from home. When pandemic hit, organizations had no choice. They had to do that. And this is from my experience, you know, this is from the discussions that we've had with the leaders, that they actually felt that people were more productive. The lines between the work and the home hours were blurred, right? And yeah, everything went well. So now, post-pandemic, it's about, okay, bringing people back to work. But I think a lot of things have changed in terms of, you know, needs of employees. For example, now the focus has shifted to well-being more than anything else. I think it's about people spend like 8 to 10 hours minimum in office or working, right? How do you really cater to their well-being? Mental well-being being the most important. So yeah, I think those things have changed, but at the end of the day, it's about employees.
Perfect. I think so. To summarize this, I think it is the art of storytelling that remains consistent, right? How do you just storytell honest, genuine employee stories, their experiences? So that's what I'll take from this discussion on this first question. Second question to Pallavi. Employer branding is mostly considered as an external facing thing, right? We talk about what do you post on LinkedIn, what do you post on Insta, Facebook. It's mostly considered as external facing. I think something that happened last year and that humbled a lot of HR professionals was the Great Resignation era, right? Where we felt the need of connecting with employees, our own internal employees. What do you think are some of the employer branding practices that you have seen in your career and in your current organization that cater to this internal audience that we need to tell about, right? The stories that we need to tell our internal audience. And what does it mean when it comes to doing employer branding for your current existing employee population?
Yeah, I think it's connected to what I was saying previously. See, employer branding has 2 dimensions, right? So actually EVP has 2 dimensions. EVP is the unique value propositions that differentiates your organization from the rest. Now, it serves 2 purposes. Why do organizations need an EVP? One, they want to create an employer brand externally that is basically to either create a perception in a certain way about your organization or influence the perception in a certain way. That's one dimension, right? The other very important dimension is, which a lot of companies actually miss focusing on, is internal employee experiences, right? So EVP is nothing but the promises that you're making to talent. It's like a sales pitch, right? That, oh, when you work with, say, Flipkart, this is what we offer you, this is how the culture is, these are the growth opportunities, so on and so forth. But when people come and become part of your organization, if they don't experience those promises being met, that's where the expectation versus reality gap happens, and that actually backfires. So someone just said, right, जो दिखता है वो बिकता है. So I'd say वो बिक तो जाता है, but वो एक ही बार बिकेगा और वो टिकेगा नहीं, right? So in the previous panel, Vinay, you talked about employee advocates. I think that's what the focus has to be. Being an employer branding professional, you just have to focus on making sure that you are influencing the culture of the organization. I don't think it's about branding in a way like creating a social media post. You know, I think that's just BAU. I mean, that just comes because you have to do that job. But your focus should be on influencing the culture of the organization. Your focus should be ensuring that your value propositions are integrated into your people processes and you're delivering on those promises. Your focus should be, showing mirror to other functions within the organization that, yes, you think you are doing great, but this is what your employees are saying, or this is what people are saying on Glassdoor, or this is what is coming from external surveys, right? So yeah, I think it's very important to influence employee experiences, because at the end of the day, it's your employees who will make your brand. If they are happy, they will go ahead and talk about. And starting you have to put a lot of focus on building employee advocates, but your focus should not be on telling them what they have to say, but more of how to say. So at Flipkart also we have like like launched an advocacy program last year, and we've been investing in skill building of our people in terms of how to leverage channels like LinkedIn, how to create content, how to convert their thoughts into text format, post, and so on and so forth. Yeah, so yeah, I think it has to be both internal and external.
Thank you. I think it was said jokingly, but it's a very powerful statement. Jo bik to jayega, but tick nahi jayega. Thanks for that, Pallavi. Anything that you would like to add, Pranav, Gayathri?
What I see is these days organizations are living in a lot of stress, and this employer branding has created a lot of mess actually. So if you remember those days of COVID, and one organization started opening a hospital in the office, and every organization followed, and then one organization started giving the vaccination, and every organization was doing the same thing, and if you're not doing it, it was like you are not the caring organization. And we all, as an HR, as you were mentioning, ki ek baar big to jayega, but the fact is, it's all about the art of storytelling. I will give you one anecdote, and this will make all of us HR guys think in a better manner. So in this midst of the entire COVID, we were one of the companies, then in a previous company, we launched a car, Kiger. I think all of you would have seen it and loved it. So the car business is a very different business. So first you do the name reveal, and then you do the price reveal, and then the product launch, and then you do the price reveal, and that's how it follows. So the way we do it these days, so you do the so-called name reveal, and the first the video comes, and you see that my marketing guy was jumping all over the floor that we did better than this, and we had got the maximum number of likes and loves and all those factors. And it was a OC discussion, so all the business leaders were there, and the MD asked him, so how it converts to the sales? And there was a pin drop silence for almost 10 seconds, and then those typical, covering, statements comes, and yes, because we are known and seen, and all those factors happens. Now the same thing I connect very clearly, because where I use this example is the same thing, the same stress is with the HR folks, and we try our level best, the number of likes and hits and shares, and we had this company OffiNeeds, and we have all those branding things coming into picture. But this is cliche, ladies and gentlemen, every organization is doing it. Now once I carried this word from Vinod, right, that if you have established the thing called care, empathy, purpose in the employee, and we have in this field, my so-called the automotive company, which I say, almost the employees were working in the company from last 20-25 years, and the Coca-Cola company, which I worked after that, almost like 20-25 years. So it is not that just a company and a name and the brand which carries, it's all these words which matters a lot. At the end of the day, Professor mentioned one word called psychological contract. So it comes to the employee, and it is very important. We as an HR should not get faked with this marketing jingos. Rather, we stand with the truth, with the organization, with the words which we were told and taught in our college days. I think I was bit extended, but I wanted to make it clear. Thank you.
I can sense that we are the ones who are standing between you guys and the dinner, so I'll try to keep it short before I open it for an audience quick Q&A. My final question to you, Gayathri, would be that there's a saying in the corporate world that what gets measured gets improved, right? And why should employer branding be any different, right? As HR professionals and marketing professionals who are driving employer branding, what do you think are some of the practices that we should follow when it comes to measuring the ROI of employer branding? Because ultimately it's all about ROI, right? We have to figure out why are we doing it and what is the rationale behind doing these things.
I would say, Kushal, it's a very difficult question, because I see employer branding as an overarching umbrella. Anything and everything you do will have an impact. For example, if I go for a family function and then somebody is holding my hand and saying, you work for SAP, you help my daughter realize her dream. Or I go to, we have a kids day in our office, and one kid will come and say, I'm so proud that my parents are working for SAP. And I'll ask the kid, okay, do you know what SAP is doing? And the person will say, yeah, I know exactly what SAP is doing. So these are the moments that matter, wherein we touch the lives of employees, and then that will translate to if you really want ROI, I can say internally, the employee engagement score, or the retention of your high performers, or the number of people staying back with you for a number of years. The external factors, I would say that your rehire numbers, okay, or it could be your the day one slot what you get in your tier 1 colleges, or the aging of a job posting in a social media. So it could be umpteen numbers what you can give or example. So employee branding is something which you never leave with. For example, I see a company, I drop my kid to school, I see a logo, somebody is carrying a goodie. Okay, so I get to know that company. Or I kind of see in LinkedIn something about the company. And a job posting comes in, maybe I get through, I do not get through. If I get through, I live through what the company promised. I might come out of it. And even if I come out of it, I'm still connected with the company. I talk to someone, I try to see what's happening in the company, or I be part of the alumni, so that employer branding is something which will never leave anyone, is what I'm thinking.
Perfect. I think we can open it up for a Q&A from the audience. Any questions to the panelists from anyone? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. And this is Abdul actually, and a warm welcome to all of you, the panelists. So my question is, we have been talking about employer value proposition, but most of the things that we also spoke about but haven't told is something what we call as employee value proposition. And I was just reading a few surveys, and it says that about 80% of the job seekers in the next 5 years will be using social media as a medium for searching for jobs or career advancement. So is there any structured way where we can bring in a concept like employee value proposition? Because employer value proposition is basically talking about from an organization standpoint, while employee value proposition is going to talk from an employee standpoint. That's basically my question. It's open to any of the panelists.
Maybe I'll start first. So what we have done, from example, right, at SAP, we have come up with an EVP tagline, which is very powerful. We build breakthroughs together. So who is we, right? So we have created some persona, universal persona. For example, everybody would want to work for a reputed brand. Everybody would want to see their career soar. Everybody want to see that they're getting great learning opportunity. So these are some of the elements we picked and chose, saying that this will be applicable for anyone across, globally as well. Then we went to different groups. For example, a working mother, or a young talent who just graduated from college and working with us. Or it could be somebody who's in the development field, or somebody in the sales field. So what are the things that will touch the anchor each one of these particular groups, okay? Then we came up with certain themes like, is it supporting growth? Is it supporting collaboration? Is it shaping the future together? So there are 4 themes based on that. Then what we did was, we have a digital platform beautifully that will curate the content for employees. Somebody spoke about whether employees will create that spelling mistake and things like that. So that's not there, because you pick and choose a theme. For example, if I am picking a theme of well-being and how the organization is supporting me to keep up my well-being for myself as well as for others. So I bring in my story as to how the organization was able to help me and how I could give it back. Could be to society or could be to somebody else. So these are some of the things which we came up with. And again, there was a question about the geographical, cultural nuances. We also try to go a little deeper and try to see, for example, all of you know, in Japan, the culture is the workaholic, right? The number of death due to work-related stress is so high. Then in versus other region like France, wherein they even have a policy to disconnect after 5 p.m., right? So the work-life balance is so high. So we went to the countries and tried to see which will apply to the cultural sensitivity in that particular country, and picked up the themes. And employees generally came up with stories. And that is the brand or the social stories that is making a LinkedIn presence these days, or a Insta, or whatever you name it.
A beautiful question. And my first company was Indian Army, organization rather. So the thing is, these days, this word employer value proposition is a myth. It is an employee value proposition itself. And today when we talk about this swift media, social media, LinkedIn's, if you say, we can write anything on our, let's say, company page. but the employee will, if he is not happy, he will write something else. And every employee is a brand ambassador of the company, so you cannot ignore him, that whatever he has written or whatever experience he is sharing. Someone was mentioning about glass doors, and it is quite evident thing now. And this is the way the things are happening. So it is no more the thing of employer value proposition is a passe. Employee value proposition is the truth, is the future, and it is working these days. A very good question. Thank you.
Yeah, and the moment I said a glass door, actually, and the way that we portray ourselves on LinkedIn, myth versus reality. There's an instance that came to my mind. There is somebody who had put his resignation as clear visibility engineer. So I was like, what do you do? He just gave some few words over there. And finally, it turned out to be a window cleaner.
Perfect. I think we had a question there. Yeah. Can somebody pass the mic there?
Hello everyone, Anusha here from Wenger & Watson. So I have a very weird question. Another thing which was mentioned was customer first principle. So I just want to understand, since you use terminologies like ROI and then employer branding. So I just want to understand which can be given more weightage when it comes to like customer first principle versus employee first principle.
Can I go?
So yeah.
So that's a very interesting thing, is what organization promises to a talent, right? So employee first is something that is basically related to culture, that this is what you will get when you work with an organization. But customer first could actually be what is expected of you when you work with an organization, right? There are two things. One, this is what you can expect from an organization. So at Flipkart, everything that we do is employee first. We keep our people at center of all our decisions to create that culture. But at the same time, when they join the organization, we have certain value systems, right? Customers first is one of our value. And we expect people to deliver and live those values into their day-to-day work. So it's like, okay, this is what I can expect, but this is what I'm expected to do as well. So both are equally, I'd say, important from organization's lens as well as employee's lens. I hope that answers.
Yeah. Just to add to that, I think employee first is a mentality. It's a mentality that you should have as an employer. And a customer first is more like a sort of a principle or a competency that you want everybody in the organization to have. So as an employer, I think if you have that mindset of putting employees first, it will always be there. And I don't know who said this, but it's a fact that if you take care of your employees will take care of your customers.
I will rephrase it like this, that if for the organization, the employee is the first, then for them, the customer will be the first.
Any last question before we move on?
Yeah, I have a question. So Andrea Lessa from European Association of Employer Branding. So in the last weeks, I saw how different from Rishikesh to Bengaluru, Mumbai, and it's so vibrant, so different. What about employer branding? What do you think are the best employer branding spots or case studies which you personally like?
Question around case studies is what you mentioned?
Yeah, so for example, a company which made a magnificent employer branding case study, or just an employer which you believe is the truly best in terms of employer branding in India.
I think, I'm not sure if they have invested in employer branding as much as we are doing. I think for them, they've been unique in the way they've kind of come up with practices for employees, and they've had that early mover advantage. So for them, I think they had a lot of organic brand ambassadors, right, in form of their employees. So I think at least till last couple of years back, Google used to be one aspirational employer for every person. We'd ask that who's the employer that you want to work with. Google would be the first name, Microsoft comes second, and then so on and so forth. So I think,
yeah. So if you ask,
may I request? So you were speaking about Google, and do you think this is the Google work globally or Google work in India? And if possible, when you share your experience, please focus on company work in India, because this is truly Indian experience. Well, I'm not sure about Google. I may believe that Google has done a magnificent global work with their great EVP, built for everyone, with a movie which was shot with Google and so on.
So I feel, Andre, I think it's, for India, it was unique. I mean, they have done great work at a global level, but for a market like India, right, the practices that they came up with was kind of unique when they did. Not many organizations were offering those propositions to candidates. So I think that's what really worked for them. I'm not sure if that is as much true today, because I honestly don't see a lot of branding efforts from Google, at least, that I see.
Maybe if I may.
I would like to reply to him. Hi. The brand is Tata, right? It's Indian, and it is based in India, and it's a true case for world, right? So Tata is the best brand, in compared to what you were asking, right? Google is world, but Tata is Indian. So that's the best case I can.
Yeah, and we stay in Tata now. Yeah, Stash belongs to Tata. Yeah.
So I'll give my views on this. I think one thing that, even though I think now my job is at risk, I don't know how to handle it. But yeah, I think an important thing for Indians in particular is the use of humor when it comes to employer branding. I think a couple of new age startups are doing it very well. To be honest, I think Zomato does a very good job when it comes to using using humor when it comes to connecting with employees or prospective customers. They have a very good job at. When I say that, I will also like to use the name of Razorpay in the same breath, because I think we also do a fab job in terms of using humor to connect with potential employees and with our internal employees. We are a meme-first company. Our presentations are all hands start with a meme. And that's another reason that I think humor is also a very important part of when it comes to connecting with at least people in India. Like if you have a meme which people can resonate with, trust me, the new age employees that are coming in the organization, especially the people who are born after 2000, they find it as a good way to connect and make it relatable. So I think Zomato is one brand that comes to my mind because they've done a very good job on LinkedIn when it comes to using humor as a way to connect with Indians.
Zomato, right?
Zomato.
Yeah.
Can I add to this? The question is quite tricky, but the thing is, it is referential, okay? And there are many companies in different domains. It is not what great stories what you create, rather it is what great feelings which you create between the employees. And I cannot specify one company. In different domains, there are various companies, but for that you'll have to be here, study the companies which have done great things for the employees, and this is quite a great story which India carries in terms of culture, in terms of sustainability, in terms of diversity. So it's not that one company you will find it. In a small or big ways, I can specify many companies, but we can talk later. We should not specify the companies, but the fact is you will find the domains and so-called, not only Indians, any company, any country will have many such companies which worked for the feeling of the employees, and that's how the employee branding the employees carry in a very different manner. Yeah?
You can also study about Flipkart, by the way. It's an Indian organization.
Thank you, it was a pleasure.
I would say a brand which all of us would relate immediately is Amul. Any recent things or any political change, right? Then you see an Amul ad with the mascot saying that, okay, this is the thing. And the second thing, I saw a beautiful ad from Dunso one day, which spoke about, which purely connected with the core daily function what the Dunso does. And that was kind of connecting, the Indian core values. So something that will touch the code, which is like the core value, the family, the emotions. And the first Indian MNC I saw coming up with the true employee story is Infi, when they started recruiting. And that was the first time when an Infi employee came out and saying, I'm proud to work for Infosys because of these reasons.
I don't know about the ROI for employer branding, but Andrea, I think you have had a great ROI by doing this market study quickly.
Thank you.
Do we have time for one more question or? Okay, one last. Go ahead.
I represent Arogya World. Just to give you a quick viewpoint from the role of employer branding in shaping the future workplace is towards creating the sustainable culture of health. I think health and well-being is a very, very important subject, right? And today, if you see the COVID has taught us that how important is the mental well-being, right? Today in India, if you see, the 75% of the deaths are happening because of these chronic diseases, right? So what is organization doing in terms of creating the sustainable culture of health and advancement of workplace health, right? Because you will agree that the healthier employees are the happier employees, right? And they are more resilient and they are more productive. And that hits the directly bottom line of the organization, right? So would you like to talk a little bit more about this?
Sure.
What are the practices you're playing?
I'll take a stab at it. I think
Thank you.
One thing that has happened is that now we talk about well-being in complete totality, right? We talk about mental health as well as physical health. I think mental health as a topic has been a taboo for most of the society in India, right? And it's reflected at our corporates also. If you look at employee assistance programs, the usage of employee assistance programs in any organization, in a best case scenario, I think pre-pandemic was 3%, 4%, which is like hardly people using employee assistance program to reach out and talk about mental health. And I think what has happened now is that people have now realized that, and employers in particular, right, that if you want your employees to be productive, you have to invest on the overall well-being of an individual. It is no longer about just taking care of physical well-being. Mental well-being is equally important. And that's why I think what organizations are now doing is they're looking at how do we invest in our mental health of our employees, which tends to the point of how to create psychologically safe workplaces. How can people bring their complete self to work, right? And I think Gayathri was mentioning about domestic violence and everything. These are situations in life which take a mental health toll on you, right? It's a toll on your mental health. And by being more open and being more empathetic, that's what organizations, at least in India, have started doing. I think mental health in the last 2 years has had a great journey. And it has taken great leaps in the last 2 years. And that's something that I think organizations are realizing, because they know the fact that if the productivity loss for a mental well-being is higher than a physical well-being situation, right? And the amount of stress that people have these days, there are a lot of efforts that companies are doing. And you've seen a lot of startups mushroom in the last 2 years in the mental well-being space in India. And a lot of funding has gone in that area, which is about mental health tech. And this is a change that is definitely felt in the ecosystem, and companies are doing something about it. Like to talk about Razorpay, we had the World Mental Health Days somewhere in October. We ran an entire month campaign of it is okay to not be okay, right? Talking about how leaders should talk about their vulnerabilities, where the CXOs came and talk about that this is how I deal with stress. I also feel stress, and these are my hacks of surviving these stressful days that I have at work. So I think these are things that some organizations are doing, but if the panel can contribute more.
Right. So what we did at SAP is we introduced a mental well-being leave, because we wanted to start with that. When people openly start applying, because in US it's very common. You see out of office saying that I am taking a mental illness leave to rejuvenate myself and I'll come back to work on this day. But that is something which is not very common. In Indian, I know that we take a long time to reach there. So these are baby steps what we've done. And the second thing is we have created employee network group who have gone through such situations and then who came out of it successfully, and who can in turn influence, because not easy all the time to talk to a stranger, a psychologist or a counselor, and pour your heart out and get all the information. So you need to, it is easy for you to talk to a peer who is in a similar situation and maybe who would have gone through it. So you can first have that conversation, then take a professional counseling or help. So that was another thing what we did. We ran a campaign saying it is okay not to be okay. So if you're not okay, tell us. And we had our own programs and initiatives, and somebody spoke about the psychological conduct, the psychological safety workshop with the managers. Because at one point in time we realized managers are not equipped enough to handle mental well-being issues. So we had a case where one employee kept on calling midnight throughout the early morning, and the manager was upset because it was person's birthday, and the whole birthday was spoiled because of the mental well-being, or the repeated calls and the issues whatever cropped up. So then we had to sensitize the managers, walk them through enablement session and all of that. one session not enough. Nobody will become an expert, right? So we had to do a series of things and again identify those managers who are comfortable to handle those situations, who will act as a multiplier in those kind of situations. And then we did a series of events.
I just want to add, what we do at Flipkart. So we looked at well-being holistically. Okay, so it starts with psychological, mental well-being, physical well-being, financial well-being, time off, so on and so forth, right? So I think one is coming up with initiatives which people can actually leverage. For example, unlimited wellness leaves is a new policy that we recently launched. It's really unlimited. If you have a genuine reason, you can go on wellness leaves. We launched various policies for people to have flexibility in the way they work, part-time, part-pay kind of policy. So those are all things at the policy side. But what we also realized is a lot of times what leads to mental well-being issues, right? So instead of just taking reactive steps that, okay, now the person is suffering, okay, let's solve for it. What could be the possible reasons at work front, right? For example, we also look at how we can integrate and sensitize different processes, performance being one, right? So if people feel that there is favoritism being played in the organization, or there is an issue with fairness in how people are being evaluated, it could actually have an impact on mental health of the person, right? Which might not show or crop up as easily, but how do we solve for that? How does our performance development process and philosophy is actually making sure that these issues don't crop up at work level, right? So yeah, so I think it's about coming up with proactive as well as reactive, strategies to kind of look at that. But I think it's a journey that we have begun. I'm sure most of the organizations would have just started. This is the topic that actually cropped up after pandemic. Yeah, so we are constantly benchmarking what we do with the market best, and we are trying to see how we can evolve further. We have also launched ERGs very recently for multiple groups, moms, new moms, for LGBTQ plus community, and many more, because it's not just about, it's about everything, it's about inclusivity, right? So how can people feel themselves and be themselves at work? So yeah, those were some of the things that we did.
Long story short, just small thing. So post-COVID, one thing which we all did not understand happened to all of us. When I was in army, so there is something called post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, when you see a lot of death happening around, the human mind is completely under stress. Now, no one taught us how to come out from that. And so there's a lot of anxiety, and the Great Resignation is an after effect of that. Lot of anxiety, lot of FOMO, lot of cognitive dissonance, where you feel something is not good, right? And so a lot of changes what we see in the society. So employee assistance program, which was very less used before, is too extensively used. I don't want to mention many organizations, but you can just Google it. You'll get a position called head of mental wellness or well-being being created, the position. The job is to take care of all these activities. Then pre-COVID, there was only so-called yoga and breathing which used to happen. But now it is more than, people are also talking about 4-day working and all those things which is happening. So what is the crux out of it is we have been accepting people with diverse complexity behavioral issues. And we as an HR are quite okay to understand that people are not okay, right? And there are some days, but this doesn't spoil the compliance and the discipline committees. But yes, we accept people the way they are. It is more acceptance, and by the way, those surveys which used to happen and those inputs, the free dialects which used to be written, we are more focused on that, because rest everything is number, but this shows the real feeling. So a lot of things are happening, and great question, by the way. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, everyone. I think
Yeah,
we can call it the end of the discussion.
I had something to share. Since we are talking about COVID, I was actively involved with BBMP COVID for the last 2 years, and one of the things that we did was we had 8 zones in Bangalore. We divided that, and each zone we made it compulsory that they should have at least 8 ECGs We are not talking about echocardiogram. We are talking about emotional caregiver. And most of the people that were involved were from corporate level. And yeah, I'm very happy to say that they carried this to their organization as what we did as volunteers. And I was responsible for the burials and cremations, and we had to deal with a hell lot of stuff. And in fact, many of us also got depressed because of this, and we ourselves needed counseling. In fact, I had to move out of Bangalore because I was infected in COVID in the first wave. 40% of my right lung was infected, and I've been told to abstain from all physical activities, but this never stopped us. And one of the things that's very close to my heart is the mental wellness programs that companies are doing, and I follow it very closely actually. Thank you so much for all that you're doing.